The postman's just been, it's come through the door from Mike at Britannica Restorations. I now have a selection of stickers and currently not a Landrover to stick them on, so they'll be in the box. Thanks, Mike. So this is the steering relo, which has refused to come out of its housing in the old cross member, so we've pulled it out with its cross member housing, and you can see, I mean, I've just nicked the tube that it fits inside, and it's absolutely rammed full of rust and corrosion, so much so that it had actually burst the seam. And I've prized that open a little bit. What I'm going to do is stick some probably penetrating oil in there. If that don't work, then the whole thing's got to come out, flush it with some solvent, and then stick it in a rust eater so that it just eats away everything that's packing it out. The alternative is to carry on grinding until basically I can split that down all the way, but it's quite a heavy casing. You got a, oh, it's about 1/4 of an inch plate inside, which bolts a retaining ring, that, which is knackered. So I'll probably remake that out of a piece of solid. It picks up on those hole centres in the chassis. Yeah. Now I've been feeding this with penetrating oil, where it's been upside down for a while, and it's a bit warm where it's been ground. So I've been feeding it around the joint for about a week and a half, around this position, to dribble down, and it's still solid. So I don't think it's going to come off without a wrestle. So there we go. I need to do disc on my grinder, and then I'll probably nick this side off first, and then have a look, see if I can actually get that opened up. Resilient though. So sawn around that all the way around with the hacksaw, and I'm just peeling back the edges, but you can see that weren't coming out in a rush, and that's still dry after a week's worth of oil going in. You don't want to play. Look at the state of that. I don't think you'd have ever got that out if it was in the chassis and you wanted to whip it out for a quick service. Yeah, I don't think so. That'd have been another Landrover 10-minute job. Anyway, we'll chibble off what's left and then see if we can knock the ends off. That one and that one. Well, that fought to the last. That's bloody state of it. I mean, I'm not harmed that, but I mean, all of this should be soaked through with that rust penetrating oil. It's dry as a witch's. Anyway, I'll clean that up now and then flush it. I wonder if it's that thick on the other one, on the new one. Anyway. So I've undone 2 top screws, and I've been flushing it with initially white spirits. I've taken out the bottom screw. I've had a load of white spirits run through it, and then some that PB Blaster oil, penetrating oil, and then WD-40, and now there's some engineering oil, so ISO 68. You can see it dripping out. It's coming out quite clean now, so I'm going to let that drain through, drip it into my little pot, and then apparently it's filled up with transmission oil, so EP90, which I haven't got. So once that's flushed through, I'll plug it off and then get myself a litre of oil. But the thin stuff, it's only coming out the drain hole, there's nothing leaking out the other areas, so that would suggest that the seals are good. Yeah. Steering relays, all good fun. I've been reading about some guys that somehow they fit somewhere around here a grease nipple and fill it with grease, and there's various views on that, but It starts off with oil, so I might as well leave it with oil. I am wondering about putting the arm back on, taking off this top plate and cleaning it up though where it's been. But I think the coat of paint won't sort out. Oh, well, that's it topped up. It moves freely enough. There's evidently some wear in it because there's a tight spot. Now, my understanding of this thing is the rotation is not a great deal. That arm on it is maybe 45 or 60 degree rotation, and there's a noticeable stiff spot going in there. Stiff, 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 stiff. That's my knuckles cracking. Yeah, that's the stiff spot. Anyway, topped it up with that stuff, which is that was the differential gear oil for my 110. So that's more than adequate. Inside here, there's a pair of split bushes at either end, which are tapered, and a bloody great big spring in between them, which is pushing them apart, which is pushing one taper into the other, so that as it wears, it takes up the slack, so you don't get any sort of slop in your steering box. The bushes will eventually wear out. They're made of what appear to be a tuffnel. Given that the rate that it took the oil through was pretty good, I don't think there's that much wear in them. And the reason I say that is, if you have a look at the diagrams of the bushes themselves, they've got a vertical groove running down them, and that's the only means that the oil can transfer from the top to the middle and out the bottom. Now, I flushed it all through, as I said originally, and I've topped it right up, and it's took quite a while to feed the oil through because the gaps aren't that big, but it didn't take all night, which is what I've read reported. And as these bushes wear, that gap that allows the oil through becomes smaller and smaller. Enough to say, we're good to go. So I've degreased it. I'll give it a overnight, make sure nothing's leaking out, and then get some treatment on this so that it can't corrode again. Yeah, that's its first coat of aqua steel. You can see it's starting to work. It's already cured here. It's not very warm in the workshop, so it's going to be an overnight and then a second coat, and then I'll probably put a coat of paint over the top once it's done. I've just treated the rust on the underside of the rear end. I've done what I can without messing up the areas where I've got a weld. You put it on white and it gradually turns a sort of black. All you got to do is not have it rain on it whilst it's reacting. But it can go on to wet rust, that's not a problem. Yeah. Well, that's now had 2 decent coats by brush on the bits I can get to, which is basically, if I can see it and get a brush in there, it's had a coat. You can see it's just drying off now. I've actually got a new toy, which is our hot air blower. Variable speed and 2 heat settings, and yeah, it's doing the business. Dog's not impressed, particularly as it says pet dryer on it. She's a bit apprehensive. Anyway, the stuff's curing off now. The cloths and stuff are just to block some of the holes, so that I'm trying to heat the chassis up. That's probably 10 or 12, 15 degrees now. And it's colder here, a bit further along. One of the handy bits about having big holes in it. I can't do the rest now until I've got to come back out with a grinder and just whiz off the surface rust a bit more, and then it's case of it's ready then for welding up. Then I'll flip it over, weld up the other sides, and then coat the other side of it. I've used I don't know, just under half a tub so far. I've flipped it back over and I'm just doing the upper side of the chassis now, or the rear end, rear 2/3 of it. The little air dryer is working all right, but needs about 20 minutes down each rail to warm the rail up, and then you start seeing the reaction, the colour change. So I'm just going to go and have a cup of tea now while that finishes off baking that side. But for 50 quid, I think it's money well spent. So we're making progress with the removable gearbox cross member. So these plates need welding on to the cross member, and then the cross member gets slit here. This section is then welded onto the chassis rails, and then we've got a couple of these are actually M10 acres I've got them, and B I think they're stainless. And then inside there's some crush tubes which need tack welding just to hold them in place. Yeah, we're near enough done. I've just got to slit it and then do the welding. I'm actually wondering whether I can't slit it without doing the welding, and once the weld, I really want it all held on there and then slit it, but I can't see a way of doing that. I'll have to just slit it and then line it all back up. Yeah, anyway, should work. Be a loud bang if it don't. Just a food for thought. I don't want to lose the position, if you like. If I chop that on without having these brackets welded on to pick up the holes again, I don't know that position. So what I've done is I've just chopped down the sides. So the last bit is the flat plate underneath, and that's not cut through. I'm now going to refit the brackets down the side so I know everything's lined up, and then they'll stay on then until this is welded along here, and then I can cut the last piece off. Otherwise it might end up with it either too wide or too narrow, and it'd be a pain in the arse. So that's just food for thought. Well, the chap that is my tame weld has been round, and after a bit of jiggery pokery getting the TIG unit set up, he's finished welding this all up. I've just cleaned it up, waiting for the chassis paint to turn up, and it'll get a coat of that before we weld these bits onto the chassis itself. So yeah, I'd have welded it myself, but I can't weld yet, and I don't want to start doing structural stuff practicing. That's the welder. So yeah, all good stuff. Tomorrow we're going to start doing the actual chassis welding on the outrigger, and then look at getting the front section put on as well, to see how far we get. Well, we've got the front seam welded round, butt jointed here and seam welded, and we decided what we're going to do is put a couple of plates on and basically go round it just to reinforce that joint. Reason being, that's a bit crap there, and there's a similar patch on the inside here. We're pretty sure we got the alignment right. There's the discrepancy seems to be in the top shape of this. You've got a curve coming round, then a flat, and then another curve, and I think on the original that's a curve, sweeping curve all the way through. But it can't be much out because we've got all the hole centres lined up. So the only other sort of alignment error can be in the tilt of that, which would obviously throw the steering box on a slight angle. But both of the connections, top and bottom, to the steering box are via a ball joint, so any misalignment's taken up with that. It's not going to affect the suspension. And as I say, that position we know is right as per the original. It's only that if we've got 2 or 3 mil extra material or too little material, it would slightly change that yaw or pitch. that outrigger's on. Got the hole centres for the suspension right, and I made it with a couple of holes to plug weld, which is done. I'm not going to bother dressing the weld off with that because there's no need to. So it covered his chassis paint anyway. So yeah, my next job's making up the patches, and then we'll get them welded on tomorrow, and then I'll flip it over and do the holes on the underside and replace the gearbox cross member. All good stuff. And then we've got to repair the battery stand because that got chopped when we were buggering about at the front end. It could be.
Struggling there because I can't get
in
because of that.
Just prepping up for the gearbox cross member, so I've took the old one off. Before I did that, I measured the distance from the vertical face to this mid cross member, so I've got it parallel and it's in the right position. It'll need tacking here, then the mid section taking out, and then basically seaming along around this bottom U section, both sides. So that's that done. I've got to fit my patches to these, make sure they're a nice snug fit. And this one, I've got to grind down this, which is where there was a web fitted across here. The new ones are going down a bit, so I'll take that out, clean all this up ready for TIG welding round, and pull these joints in a bit. Same on to the side, and then it's patch that and repair those two. And then I've got a bit of jiggery pokery to do down on this one, which I'm gonna go and have a sandwich and a cup of tea and have a think about how to do that. So I've done a bit more chopping out to effect a repair on this. This is the flywheel cross member. There was a rot down here, and there's rot up the side here. I'm less fussed about that bit, but there was rot on the inside of the chassis member. So what I've done is I've cut a big enough hole out of here to give me access to get the grinder in to cut that. Now I can weld a plate basically from there to sit over that gap and weld it up here. I might get a couple of tacks down each side, and then basically a pair of plates to fill the hole then. That's the plan. Got to think of another way to do it, and then I'll probably just put a small weld plate over there because it's a bit snotty inside. It doesn't actually carry anything. It's a brace to keep the two pieces apart. Gearbox cross member carries a gearbox, but there's nothing actually sitting on that. It's all clearance. So I think it is only just to keep the two side frames distance. I've finished as new as I can fitting this piece. So the last thing is a couple of big clamps, get some tacks around it. That'll hold it down. And then I'm going to weld that. When I weld that one on, I'll weld it to that, and then seam it down the top there, and seam down these cuts which are going over the joints. And then there's a couple of little angle brackets that fit there. Just about finished doing the chopping up, so we've got that piece to finish, and then t'other piece to the side. Gary doing the last bit of the weld on the underside of the chassis. Well, I guess the good news is it's not raining and snow don't leak as quick. Anyway, sterling job on part of Gary. pretty much we've done whatever we found and a few other bits, so it's great progress. We'll flip it over and I think we've got one patch and 2 seams to do. I say we, that's the royal we, which means Gary. Well, a bit of fettling to make sure the bolts go through smooth so they're not wrestling, and that's the removable gear box cross member sorted. It basically all needs treating now with a rust eater and then some chassis paint over it. Yeah, snow's now melting, and every now and again we get a thump as something drops out the tree onto the top of the roof. Yeah, so it made really good progress today. I pretty much cut all the patches to fit, bar a couple. This one we basically cut into it. We found that the whole of this side was pretty thin, so I've just lashed on a bigger plate, and I've got to mark it round and grind it out now. We ran out of time, so it was a case of getting it on. That's gone on all right. On the front, there's a butt weld there, and then we've got plates clamped either side with big what do you call them, not spot welds but puddle welds, and then they're welded to the new piece and the old piece, and then they're also welded to the casing around it. Reinstated the braces. He has done a really smashing job. I mean, I know there's comments about don't overlap stuff because you get water ingress. Well, that's my job now, to get it all hot and then flood it with some cavity seal, hot so that it follows it round. This one's gone on all right nicely. There was nothing else down this side. It's that then. Yeah, it's done a nice job. Oh, of course, it's all down to the preparation. Oh. No, I'm a big thanks for that. Interestingly, we've used 2 full bottles of argon, so that's roughly 100 quid's worth. I've got to go and take them back and get my deposit back on one of them, so I only need to keep one. And they have nearly 100 quid deposit, which is a bit excessive. And I've used, I don't know, maybe 2/3 of one of the sheets that I got for free, or near enough free. So yeah, it's tickety-boo. I'm gonna call it a day now because I've had enough. The next job tomorrow is give it a brush down and then go over it with the rust converter, everything that's not been done. I'll take off the cross member now. That can be done in the workshop, and the brackets which hold it can be done out here. So I think we can call that significant progress, so I'll get another video up. It'll be interesting to see what you guys think. I think I'll get another 5 years out of that, no trouble.